10%. 10%. Garrick's laughter ricocheted off the glass walls of his corner office, slicing through the air like sharp edges. You're asking for a 10% raise after what, 12 years? He couldn't even finish before another burst of laughter shook his shoulders. I stood there, frozen, clutching my portfolio of accomplishments, the tangible evidence of my worth. A 60-page document filled with every algorithm, every efficiency boost, every sleepless night I'd endured while he raked in bonuses big enough to buy vacation homes. The system I built cut delivery times in half, I said, my voice smaller than I wished. The Eastwood account alone? Garrick waved a dismissive hand, still chuckling as he reclined in his chair. Everyone's replaceable, even you. He gave me that practiced CEO grin that never touched his eyes. If you think you're worth more, go test the market. Something cracked inside me. Not my heart, something deeper. The foundation of 12 years of faith, of believing that hard work eventually paid off. I understand, I said quietly, gathering my portfolio. The pages trembled in my hands. Listen, Garrick said, his tone softening with fake concern. You're good at what you do, but you're a back office function. The board doesn't even know your name. That's just business. That's when I knew exactly what I would do. I'm Ivy, by the way. 34 years old, supply chain algorithm specialist. And up until that moment, I'd been pathologically afraid of confrontation. The kind of woman who apologizes when someone steps on her foot. The woman who stayed at the same company for 12 years, earning 20% below market value because I believed in loyalty, because I thought my work would eventually speak for itself. Before I go further into this story, I'd really appreciate it if you'd take a second to tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This happened in the Midwest, but I'd love to know if stories like mine hit home everywhere. And if you've ever gone through something similar, please hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you might save you years of your life. I walked back to my cubicle, yes, cubicle, after 12 years, past the glass offices of managers who'd been there half as long as me. My desk sat in the corner of the 5th floor, surrounded by empty workstations. Our department had shrunk from 15 people to just 3 over the years. Not because the workload dropped, but because my algorithms had made so much redundant. On my screen blinked an email notification. The quarterly company newsletter, featuring Garrick's innovative supply chain overhaul that saved our biggest client, Eastwood. My overhaul. My 18-hour days for 6 straight months. My solution that slashed logistics costs by 40%. Next to my keyboard sat the cold coffee I'd abandoned 3 hours earlier when I'd finally mustered the nerve to ask for that raise. Beside it, a framed photo of my parents. Dad worked 35 years in the same factory before it shut down. Loyalty matters, he always said. Mom nodded, believing it too. I opened my drawer and pulled out a small leather notebook. Inside were the ideas I'd been jotting down for years, my personal projects, carefully dated, time-stamped, and detailed. Concepts I explored on weekends, refined on my own laptop, developed on my own time. Ideas the company had quietly implemented without acquisition, because I'd been too accommodating, too eager to prove myself. I flipped through the pages, stopping at one from 3 years ago, a set of algorithms that became the backbone of our entire distribution network. At the top, my handwriting read, Personal Project, Supply Chain Optimization through Predictive Modeling. Began 11.4 Home System. What Garrick never realized, and what the company's legal team never bothered to check, was that I'd never signed over ownership of these personal innovations. The boilerplate employment contract only covered work done during company hours with company tools. My most valuable creations were documented as personal projects, developed independently. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I'd saved but never called. Hayden, the operations director at our biggest competitor, had reached out more than once. His last message, 6 months ago, read, "The offer still stands whenever you're ready. We value innovators here." My fingers hovered over the call button. 12 years of loyalty screamed for me to stop, to stay rational, to avoid burning bridges. Then I remembered Garrick's laughter. I pressed call. Hayden speaking. "This is Ivy Reeves from Porter Logistics Solutions. I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. I think it's finally time we had that conversation. Ivy. Excitement rippled through Hayden's voice. I was starting to think you'd never call. Are you free for dinner tonight? 5 hours later, I sat across from him in a restaurant that required reservations weeks in advance. One call from him and the table was ready. I've been following your work for years, Hayden said, studying me over his water glass. Or rather, I've been watching the sudden leaps in Porter's performance that seem to line up with the gaps in your LinkedIn updates. Those supply chain algorithms for the Eastwood account were revolutionary. A tension tightened in my chest. How did you know that was me? Hayden smiled. Because Garrick doesn't have the technical knowledge to understand what those systems even do, much less build them. And when we tried to reverse engineer them and failed, I knew we needed the mind behind them. I took a sip of water, steadying my thoughts. What exactly are you offering? Leadership position. Triple your salary. Stock options. Your own team, he said, leaning forward. But most importantly, credit. Your name on your work. And if I brought my personal innovations with me, I asked, systems I built on my own time with my own equipment? Something flickered in his eyes, understanding. He nodded slowly. We have a formal IP acquisition process with fair compensation. Unlike some companies, we don't claim ownership of our employees' personal creations. I pulled my leather notebook from my bag and placed it on the table. I have proof these systems were personal projects. Porter implemented them but never legally acquired them. Hayden's eyes widened slightly, realizing the implications. That's a serious oversight on their legal team's part. Garrick doesn't value back-office departments, I said, repeating his own words. Including legal, apparently. 2 weeks later, I placed my resignation letter on Garrick's desk. He barely glanced up from his computer. 2 weeks' notice, he muttered, scanning the page. Where are you going? I thought about lying, but decided honesty would hit harder. Radius Shipping Solutions. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Our competitor? That's poor timing. We're finalizing a major expansion with Eastwood. I know, I said calmly. I designed the delivery model for that proposal. His expression shifted from surprise to concern. We could discuss retention options, perhaps that raise you mentioned. The offer from Radius is triple my current pay, plus a leadership role and stock options, I replied. He laughed, but it came out hollow. They're overpaying. You'll disappoint them once they realize you can't deliver what they expect. I smiled, feeling an unfamiliar confidence settle in. We'll see. My last 2 weeks were oddly peaceful. I wrapped up transition documents, trained my replacement, a nervous recent graduate both intimidated and fascinated by the systems he was inheriting, and backed up every record of my personal projects. I also saved copies of emails showing where I'd shared my independent innovations without any formal transfer of ownership. On my final day, I met with Vance from legal for my exit interview. Just standard paperwork? He said smoothly, sliding a stack of forms across the desk. Non-compete, confidentiality, and a declaration that you're not taking company property. I scanned the documents carefully. I'm not signing the non-compete, I said. Vance blinked, confused. That's standard procedure. It wasn't in my original employment contract, and I'm not agreeing to it now. I met Vance's gaze steadily. And regarding company property, I'm not taking anything that belongs to Porter. I am, however, taking my personal intellectual property, work that was never formally acquired by the company. What personal property? Vance's brow furrowed. I opened my notebook, showing him the dated entries. These algorithms and systems were developed on my own time, using my own resources. Porter implemented them, but there was never a completed IP acquisition process. I have documentation to prove it. Vance's expression shifted as he flipped through the pages, realization spreading across his face. These are the core systems we use for everything. Yes, I finished for him. He stared at me, then back at the notebook. I need to make some calls. Of course, I said, closing the notebook and standing. But my employment ends today, and my personal property leaves with me. I walked out of Porter's Glass headquarters for the last time at 5:17 p.m. on a Friday. By Monday morning, I was sitting in my new corner office at Radius, briefing my team of 5 algorithm specialists, my team, on how we were going to transform the industry. 6 weeks later, the first implementation of my systems went live at Radius. Delivery times dropped by 30%. Operating costs fell by 25%. Our sales division approached Eastwood with hard data, proving we could outperform Porter's best metrics by a wide margin. Ivy, this is Garrick. We need to discuss consulting opportunities immediately. Porter is prepared to offer a substantial compensation package. Please call me back as soon as possible. I saved the voicemail but didn't return the call. 2 days later, Garrick was waiting beside my car in the Radius parking garage. This is inappropriate, I said, keeping my distance. You've put 300 jobs at risk, he said, his voice low and urgent. Porter is facing a crisis because of what you took. I didn't take anything that belonged to Porter, I replied evenly. I took my own intellectual property, projects your company used without proper acquisition. Nobody will believe that. It looks like corporate theft. I have dated documentation for every personal project, every system implementation, and every email where ownership was never transferred. Your legal team failed to do their job, and you never valued mine enough to notice. Garrick stepped closer, desperation flickering in his eyes. Name your price. Whatever Radius is paying, we'll double it. I thought about those 12 years, sitting in my cubicle while he claimed my achievements as his own, his laughter echoing in my head when I'd asked for a modest raise after saving the company millions. You once told me everyone's replaceable, I said quietly. Even me. I'm just following your business philosophy. The next quarter, Porter's stock plummeted 62%. 200 employees were laid off. News outlets called it a catastrophic loss of technical capability and a mysterious breakdown of their award-winning logistics systems. Garrick resigned under board pressure. I watched the announcement from my office while finalizing rollout plans for 3 new major clients who had just switched from Porter to Radius. Then came the lawsuit. Porter sued me for theft of intellectual property. Their case collapsed when my documentation proved the core algorithms were developed as personal projects. The judge dismissed the suit, noting that Porter had failed to secure ownership of the innovations they had used. The morning after the dismissal, Garrick appeared in my office at Radius, looking nothing like the confident CEO who had once mocked me. You destroyed everything, he said, standing in the doorway. No, I corrected him. You did that when you decided people were disposable. His voice trembled. Those people who lost their jobs, they weren't just numbers. They had families, mortgages. I felt the weight of his words, the moral complexity pressing at my conscience. I know, that's why Radius has hired 57 former Porter employees in the last 3 months. The people who suffered because of your arrogance shouldn't pay for your mistakes. Garrick stared at me, searching my face. You planned all of this. No, I said softly. I just stopped letting myself be undervalued. I held his gaze, unwavering. You could have avoided this entire downfall with just a 10% raise and a bit of respect. He left without another word. From my office window, I watched him cross the parking lot, shoulders slumped, the former CEO of what was once the industry leader. That evening, I received an email from Eastwood's procurement director. The implementation exceeded our expectations. Delivery times are 40% better than our previous provider. The board has approved expanding our contract with Radius. I forwarded it to Hayden with a short note. This is just the beginning. My name now appears on the algorithm patents. My picture hangs in the lobby beside other Radius executives. My team has grown to 15 people, including many former Porter employees who now receive the recognition and pay they always deserved. Sometimes I think about those who lost their jobs at Porter and couldn't find new ones, the collateral damage of Garrick's arrogance. It's the weight I carry, knowing that justice for one person can bring hardship to others who were simply in the wrong place. But I also remember that day in Garrick's office when he laughed at my request for basic fairness after years of loyalty. How many others had he treated the same way? How many careers had he stunted with his belief that people were replaceable parts in his corporate machine? 6 months into my new role at Radius, the full effect of my decision was still unfolding. Porter's stock hadn't recovered. Industry analysts were writing case studies about their disastrous talent management failure. Meanwhile, Radius had captured 23% of Porter's market share. My office phone rang one Tuesday afternoon. The receptionist's voice was uncertain. "There's someone here to see you." She says she worked at Porter. When I walked to the lobby, I found Marlene standing there. She'd been Porter's head of customer service for 15 years, longer than I'd been there. We'd shared lunches, venting about Garrick's leadership style. Now she clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles white. "Ivy," she said, her voice trembling, "I thought maybe we could talk." I brought her to my office, offered her water or coffee, but she refused. "I lost my job last week," she said flatly, "along with my entire department, 37 people. The weight of her words sank deep in my chest. "Marlene, I'm so sorry." "Are you?" Her eyes locked on mine. "Everyone says you're the reason Porter's falling apart. That you stole something and brought it here." "I didn't steal anything," I told her, explaining my documentation, the court ruling, all of it. She listened silently. "I'm 56 years old, Ivy. Who's going to hire me now?" I leaned forward. "Radius will. We need experienced customer service leadership. I can talk to Hayden today." She shook her head. "I didn't come here for a job." "Then why did you come?" Marlene's gaze drifted around my office. The view, the polished furniture, the nameplate on my door. "I wanted to see if it was worth it. If what you got was worth what happened to the rest of us." Her words hit me like a stone. Was it worth it? The recognition, the compensation, the validation, weighed against the pain of those who had done nothing wrong except stay at the wrong company. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," I said softly. "I just wanted what I'd earned." "We all want that," Marlene replied, standing up. "Some of us just can't take an entire company down when we don't get it." After she left, I sat still, staring at the wall. My phone buzzed, a text from Hayden. Quarterly numbers exceeded projections by 18%. "Celebration dinner tonight?" I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. In the first column, I listed every Porter employee I knew who'd lost their job. Next to each name, I searched LinkedIn, noting their experience and skills. By midnight, I had a list of 212 people. The next morning, I walked into Hayden's office without knocking. "We need to talk about Porter's former employees." He looked up from his monitor. "What about them?" I placed my spreadsheet on his desk. "These are people who lost their jobs because of Porter's collapse. Radius has benefited enormously from what happened. We have a responsibility," I said firmly. He studied the list in front of him. "We've already hired quite a few." "Not enough," I replied, sitting down across from him. "I want to propose a formal recruitment initiative focused on Porter's displaced employees. And for those we can't bring on directly, I want to fund placement support and retraining programs." Hayden leaned back, examining me carefully. "That's an expensive plan for people who don't even work here." "It's an investment, in our reputation and in our future," I countered. "And it's the right thing to do." After a long pause, he nodded. "Draft the proposal. I'll take it to the board." 3 weeks later, Operation Rebound launched. Radius pledged to interview every qualified former Porter employee. We partnered with 3 training firms to provide skill upgrades for those needing transition help. For employees nearing retirement, we created flexible consulting roles. The industry noticed. Business publications highlighted Radius's groundbreaking approach to competitive displacement. Applications for open positions rose by 300%. Clients began mentioning our corporate responsibility efforts during negotiations. Marlene called the day after the announcement. "Was this your idea?" "Yes," I admitted. "Would you reconsider joining Radius?" A brief silence. "Maybe as a consultant, not full-time." "I'm too old to start over completely. We need your experience. Name your terms." 2 days later, she was setting up in an office just down the hall from mine. Not everyone was as understanding. Jason, Porter's former operations manager, ignored my calls. Patrice from accounting sent a scathing email about loyalty and betrayal. I saved it in a folder labeled Consequences, my growing reminder that revenge is never as clean as it looks in the movies. 8 months after I'd left Porter, I received an unexpected message from Vance, their former legal counsel. Coffee? There's something you should know. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our offices. Vance looked older, new lines around his eyes, gray at his temples. I was let go last month, he said, stirring his coffee. Part of the latest cuts. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. Radius is hiring legal. He shook his head. That's not why I wanted to meet. It's about your algorithms and your documentation. My stomach tightened. The court already ruled on that. I know, he said, leaning closer. And they ruled correctly. But there's something you don't know. After your exit interview, when you mentioned your personal projects, I went straight to Garrick. I told him we should review your claims before taking any action. He showed me some old emails and from 3 years back. You had sent him detailed explanations of your algorithms, asking if the company wanted to acquire them formally. You even suggested fair compensation. I froze, coffee halfway to my lips. I don't remember that. You CC'd me, he said quietly. I found the chain during legal prep. Garrick replied, dismissing the idea. Said something like, just implement it if it works. We'll handle the details later. My chest tightened. He knew all along. Vance nodded slowly. He knew exactly what you had built, that you'd logged it as personal work, and that the company never acquired it properly. When you left and Radius started using your systems, he came to legal demanding we sue you, even after I showed him his own emails proving otherwise. He insisted anyway. Vance took a sip of coffee, his voice heavy. That's when I realized Porter deserved what it got. I leaned back, letting the revelation settle. Why tell me this now? Because you should understand something, he said, meeting my eyes. What happened to Porter wasn't just about you taking your intellectual property. It was about years of systemic arrogance. Garrick didn't just undervalue you. He did it to everyone. Legal, operations, customer service. He treated the entire company like replaceable machinery. I exhaled slowly. And now those parts are working somewhere else. Vance gave a faint, tired smile. Exactly. Your algorithms were brilliant. But Porter wouldn't have fallen apart if Garrick had built a company strong enough to survive losing one person. He didn't just lose you, Vance had said. He lost the loyalty and experience of hundreds who felt the same way. I thought about that on my drive back to Radius. My revenge hadn't destroyed Porter. It had only exposed what was already broken. That evening, my phone rang again. Garrick. My first instinct was to ignore it, but this time I answered. Ivy. His voice was rough, strained. I'm calling to apologize. Of all the things I expected, that wasn't one of them. I'm listening, I said carefully. I knew about your personal projects, he admitted after a pause. I knew you'd documented them properly. I just thought you were too loyal to ever leave, so it didn't matter. You misjudged me, I replied quietly. I misjudged everything. The confession seemed to cost him something. The board removed me yesterday. Porter's filing for Chapter 11 next week. Bankruptcy. I hadn't imagined it would go that far. I'm sorry about the employees, I said softly. That's why I'm calling, he continued. There's a final board meeting tomorrow. They're deciding severance packages. I want to recommend your Radius program for our remaining staff. You want to send Porter's employees to Radius? I asked, surprised. I want them to have jobs, Garrick said simply. Pride doesn't matter anymore. After we hung up, I walked to the window, gazing at the city lights. 12 years at Porter, unseen, 8 months at Radius, and everything had changed, not just for me, but for the entire industry. The next day, Porter announced its bankruptcy filing. By afternoon, Radius was flooded with calls from Porter's former clients. Our sales team was overwhelmed. Hayden called an emergency meeting. "We need to scale fast," he said. "Ivy, your rebound program is now priority 1. Hire every qualified Porter employee we can." Within a month, Radius had absorbed 173 former Porter staff. We expanded into 3 new offices. My team grew to 40 people, many who once sat in the same gray cubicles as me. Marlene became our chief customer experience officer. Jason eventually joined as an operations consultant. Even Vance came aboard to lead our growing legal department. A year after walking out of Garrick's office clutching my portfolio, I stood on a stage accepting the Industry Innovation Award. Cameras flashed as I looked over a sea of familiar faces, former Porter colleagues now proudly wearing Radius badges. "Innovation isn't just about algorithms or systems," I said into the microphone. "It's about valuing people, treating them as irreplaceable, not disposable. The companies that understand this will always rise above those that don't." After the ceremony, a young woman approached me, nerves flickering in her smile. "Ms. Reeves, I'm Tessa. I just joined Radius as an algorithm developer." "Welcome to the team, Tessa," I said warmly. She clutched a portfolio, the same kind I once held in Garrick's office. "Can I ask, how did you know when to stand up for yourself? I don't want to make the same mistakes." I thought for a moment before answering. "I waited 12 years too long," I said. "Don't do that." "But aren't you afraid of being seen as difficult or ungrateful?" she asked. I smiled. "Those are just words people use when they want to pay you less than you're worth." As Tessa walked away, I saw Garrick standing near the exit. Our eyes met across the room. He nodded once. Acknowledgement, maybe respect. I nodded back. He had lost everything, yet gained something too. Understanding. And I had gained everything I'd worked for, but carried the weight of how it all came to be. We were both changed by that single moment of laughter over a 10% raise request. 2 years after leaving Porter, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a framed Wall Street Journal article analyzing Porter's collapse and Radius's rise. A note was attached. "You were never replaceable." I recognized the handwriting immediately. Garrick. I hung it in my office as a reminder that value isn't defined by others. It's something you must recognize in yourself first. Last month, I launched a mentorship program for women in tech. Our first workshop focused on salary negotiation and protecting intellectual property. 300 women attended. Marlene helped organize it, and Tessa, now leading her own team, was one of our speakers. At the end, a participant asked, "Don't you feel bad about what happened to Porter?" I considered the question carefully. I feel responsible for my actions, but not guilty for claiming what was rightfully mine. That difference matters. Looking back, I realized true revenge wasn't watching Porter collapse or Garrick lose his position. It wasn't even my corner office or the industry award. Real revenge was discovering my own worth and refusing to let anyone devalue it again. It was creating a workplace where people like me, people like who I used to be, would never have to wait 12 years for recognition. If you're watching this and questioning your own value at work, remember, loyalty is admirable, but it must flow both ways. Document your achievements, know your worth, and never apologize for asking to be valued properly. The algorithms I created were complex, but the lesson is simple. No one defines your value. You do. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who might be sitting in a cubicle right now, wondering if they should speak up. Subscribe if you want more stories about finding your voice in places designed to silence it. And leave a comment telling me if you've ever had to make that choice between loyalty and self-worth. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to be replaceable.